Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game, and you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we've got a whole bunch of random things to get to. I am finally going to give you my list of cards and how they benefit from Giant Plant Forest, or Forest of Giant Plants, I believe they've called it in the English translation, or as I'm going to start referring to it, because oh my god, this is such a better name, Broken Vine Space. I can't take credit for that. It's amazing. It's not that I'm not taking credit because it's amazing. I like to think I've done good things here and there. I can't take credit for it because I didn't come up with it. We are also going to be looking very, very briefly at the Legendary Collection that's coming out in Japan because, honestly, it's garbage. I mean, it looks beautiful. But as I told you last week, and maybe even the week before as well, if you are a collector buying to put it in your binder, it's beautiful. Go after this bad boy. But if you're a player, if you're looking to play rather than collect, I really can't see any merit in it. There's a couple vaguely interesting cards which I will mention tangentially, but that really is about it. We're going to have another quick chat about the rotation. We're going to share the biggest news of the week regarding kind of the rotation. So there's an awful lot to talk about. And let's start off with some apologies. Now, last week, and I told you this was going to happen. I like to think you guys were well informed. Last week was oh my goodness, the rotation has just been announced next year as being X and Y on, or Kalos starter set. Now, I did say X and Y starter set last week. I meant Kalos starter set. I do apologise for that, first of all. And I told you it was going to be my first impression, and I think I gave you a pretty gosh darn good list. But I did miss a few. Now, there's some cards like Aldino, which, from the Boundaries Cross set, which I don't think I would have mentioned, and then there are things like the Outraged Zekrom, etc., which again, I actually saw them, but I deliberately didn't mention. But there were some big ones I did forget, so very, very quickly. Possibly the biggest one I forgot, Jirachi EX, which was very, very silly of me. The one, I believe he came out in Plasma Blast. That's the one where you bench him and you get to search for any supporter card. That has been pretty much a staple since it came out. It means that you've got, assuming you play 4 Ultra Balls, which most people do, that gives you 5 outs to a supporter on turn 1 that you otherwise might not have had. You can go Jirachi, or you can go Ultra Ball for Jirachi. Now, I mentioned on this podcast many a time that did make people complacent, because of course if your Jirachi is prized, and there's about a 1 in 10 chance it's going to be prized, then you do run into the situation where you're playing 8 supporters, and you can't use your Jirachi. But as an aid to consistency, rather than really relying on it, it was brilliant. And there were all those plays like you could Jirachi for an Archie's Ace in the Hole if it was the only card in your hand, or Ultra Ball for a Jirachi for an Archie's Ace in the Hole, because of course you could only play it when it was the only card in your hand. You could Jirachi for a Lysandra in order to pull up your opponent's bench Pokemon to win the game or take a crucial KO. Now, the good news for Jirachi lovers is that Shaman has been released. Now, Shaman is not the same. Jirachi got a supporter card, Shaman allows you to draw 2, you've got 6 in your hand. If you've got a hand full of cards, Jirachi is incredibly useful, Shaman is entirely useless. It is not the same card. But as Pokemon consistency, it will do the job very nicely indeed. If we didn't have Shaman, an awful lot of people would be very upset about the loss of Jirachi. As it is, it's not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but we can live without it now that we've got Shaman. The loss is mitigated, shall we say. Now, there were a couple others I forgot. I don't think any quite as important as Jirachi, although one might argue Skylar. I forgot Skylar. Now, that's a supporter which has seen a fair bit of play. In decks that really relied on double colourless energy, we would Skylar for computer search for double colourless energy, although computer search is rotating. In Virizion Genesect decks, we would Skylar for G-Booster, although Virizion Genesect and G-Booster are all rotating. In decks that use Tropical Beach, we would Skylar for Tropical Beach, although Tropical Beach rotated last year. And for that reason, Skylar hasn't seen as much play as it used to. But it was really useful just for grabbing you could grab a supporter or an item. A lot of the times now, especially in fighting decks, Corinna is arguably better because you can get an item and you can get a fighting Pokemon. Although remember, Corinna is just item, whereas Skylar is any trainer card whatsoever. The others I missed were N. N is going to be a huge loss. Late game comebacks, early game consistency, you name it, N had it. It was pretty much a 4-of in almost every deck, which shows you quite how useful it was. N was a very big card in the format, and it is going to be missed. I missed N because it was kept in the rotation as a promo, and I didn't get a chance to have a really good look at the promos before last week's podcast, although one could argue maybe I should have. I missed Town Map, the item that lets you look at your prize cards, or more importantly, turns them face up. And a story which isn't the first time I've told the story this week, but at UK Nationals, not this year, but last year, I was playing the Diamond Minecart himself, Dan Middleton, and he was playing Aromatisse, I was playing Frizzy and Genesect, I played a Town Map, and lo and behold, I show him that my G-Booster is prized. He now knows I cannot get one-hit KOs, because I need a G-Booster to get one-hit KOs. He piles a whole bunch of energy on a Mewtwo, guarantees himself the win, and we draw the match with one game apiece in a matchup where, outside of something like that, I had a huge advantage, given the deck lists and the decks that we were playing. And the other one I missed was Floatstone. Floatstone gave everything free retreat. It was brilliant for Garbodor, although Garbodor's rotating. It was brilliant for Keldeo, although Keldeo is rotating. But it was just a really good, almost like a perpetual switch. Although remember, you cannot retreat if you are paralysed or asleep, so you still need a switch in those situations. So I did miss a few. Floatstone N, Town Map, Skylar, Jirachi EX. They're the main ones that I missed. Now, I did tell you last week that I was not supposed to be a comprehensive list. The good news for you lovely people, at least I hope it's good news, I'd be quite upset if it wasn't perceived by you guys as good news. The good news is I have decided to do a comprehensive list, but I'm going to be doing it on YouTube instead so that I can give you a whole bunch of pictures. Today, a couple hours ago, before I started recording this podcast, I published my What We Lose from Boundaries Crossed. And probably in 2 days' time, we're going to go for Plasma Storm, and then Plasma Freeze, and then Plasma Blast, and then Legendary Treasures, finishing off with the promos. I'm going to give you videos with, and I think I use 75 different cards when talking about Boundaries Crossed here. They weren't all from Boundaries Crossed. For instance, when you talk about Computer Search, you talk DCE. When you talk about Skylar, you talk about Virizion and Genesect with G-Booster, etc. So it's, shall we say, hopefully, the videos which are going to explain the entire rotation to you, everything you need to know about the cards that are rotating. So the Boundaries Crossed one is up. It's 28 minutes long. It is, as far as I'm concerned, pretty gosh darn comprehensive. And as long as people like them and enjoy them and keep watching them, I will do videos like that for every other set that is rotating. So through those videos, you will see a complete guide to the rotation. Remember, of course, you still need to be checking out this podcast on a weekly basis, because we are going to be running through everything on a weekly basis, the big decks, etc. Now, before we get on to the new rotation news, I suppose we should have a very quick look at these new cards that have come out in Japan. So, we have now seen, thank you to PokeBeach.com as well for this. Also, thank you to PokeBeach.com. I use their pictures for my YouTube videos. I have gained permission from them in the past, so yeah, lovely people. Big fan of that website. And you can go to PokeBeach.com, PokeBeach.com, to have a look at all of these cards. Now, if we go to the Legendary Collection, it is very, very slim pickings. There's a Reshiram that can do 20 damage for a double colourless, which is vastly underpowered. There's a Palkia. And it's got an interesting but massively overpriced attack for a water colourless. It does 80 damage, and you cannot, or your opponent cannot attach energy to the Pokemon that was hit by that attack on their next turn. But of course, if they just get, switch out the active, then they can. So that's not great. There's the Pikachu EX I mentioned previously, which might be the best card in the set, you know. It's got, for a colourless energy, flip a coin until you get tails, does 30 times the number of heads. And for a lightning double colourless, you discard all the lightning energy attached to Pikachu. It does 50 damage times the number of lightning energy discarded in this way. And then expanded, where you've got electric, and you can, works like Bronzong but for electric Pokemon. Still weird saying that. When Bronzong came out, I was like, oh yeah, it's like electric but for metal Pokemon. But with electric, you can be attaching, I mean, theoretically, with 4 electric on the bench, you can be attaching 5 electric energy per turn and doing 250 damage per turn. But of course, you got 130 HP. And you're giving up 2 prizes. Zekrom can also do 20 damage for a double colourless. There is a fat-looking Deden who's chilling on some berries. 10 plus paralysis on a coin flip. There's a Wobbuffet which prevents all effects of attacks onto Wobbuffet for a coin flip for a colourless energy. There's a Hawlucha, which is nowhere near as good as the one from Furious Fists. There's a Dialga, which is kind of interesting. Again, massively overpriced, but in a Bronzong deck. Freeze time, 80 damage. During your opponent's next turn, he or she can't play Pokemon from his or her hand to evolve the Pokemon that was damaged by this attack. Well, who wants that? The vast majority of Pokemon that can evolve have like 80 or less HP anyway. If it stopped all of your opponent's Pokemon evolving, that could be useful. But it doesn't, so it isn't. Latios and Latias are underwhelming, like I said last week. Black Kyurem does 40 and paralysis on a coin flip for a lightning double colourless. White Kyurem for a fire double colourless does 40 damage and discards an energy card on a coin flip. Arceus, the first Arceus since the Arceus set, which was pre-Heart Gold Soul Silver. It was when I started playing, which I worked out the other day was about 5 years ago. You can move all your energy to Pokemon, to Arceus, as much as you want to, for a colourless energy, and that's your attack, and then you'll probably be killed. But if not, you can do, for free colourless energy, 10 damage, 30 more for each type of basic energy. Now, if you could get every type of basic energy onto Arceus, that is going to add up to a boatload of damage. But you've got to get every type of basic energy onto 120 HP Pokemon. It ain't going to work. There's a Bravery that for 4 colourless energy allows you to flip 2 coins and does 80 times the number of heads. Weirdly, we've also got a Chespin, a Fennekin, a Braxian, a Froakie, a Frogadier. We don't have any of the final evolutions, assuming this is the complete set. So, yeah. Cheers for that. And I mean, that is a legendary collection, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to sound mean. It is not a good set for players, but it is beautiful. Now, going to the Emboar EX versus Togekiss EX deck, again, it's slim pickings. There's an Arcanine that does 30 damage for 1 energy. Emboar EX we've already talked about. I mean, for 4 energy, you can do 150 damage. With a Muscle Band, that's 170. And let's not forget that in Expanded, we've got the Inferno Fandango Emboar, and just in Standard, we've got Blacksmith. So a Blacksmith double colourless, you could get Emboar going in 1 turn. Now, that's under perfect conditions, and you still need, you need a Blacksmith with 2 energy and a discard, and a DCE, and a Muscle Band, but then you're doing 170 for 1 energy. And that is doable, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think it's amazing or perfect. It's doable. I like Emboar. He's clearly one of the best Pokemon from Black and White, in my humble opinion, of course. So, I can't say for certain it's gonna see play, but I can see some people like me going, I'll give it a go. Could be worth a punt. I mean, it's certainly better than Blaziken EX, put it that way. If you really like Emboar, you can get it working. And let's not forget that with all the trainer draw we've got nowadays, and Shaman and Unknown and all of that, there is a situation where you can use Blacksmith confidently as your supporter for the turn while you still draw a whole bunch of cards. There's a Meow Stick that for 1 colourless energy allows you to attach 2 energy cards from your hand to your bench Pokemon. Now, the only interesting thing about this, and again, these are translations, they are not confirmed as English translations, but it's 2 energy cards from your hand. So, in theory, this could allow you to attach 3 special energy in 1 turn. 1 as your attachment, 2 for Meowstic. Let's be nice and clear on this, ladies and gentlemen. Using an attack on a stage 1 for that is not ideal. Togekiss, I don't like Togekiss. We've talked about him before. Fairy Energy, 20 damage, and you can attach a second energy. Hurricane Wind, 50 damage, times the amount of heads you can flip on 4 coins for a fairy and 3 colourless energy. The only time I can ever really think you would want to use that is if you were, for instance, going for a fairy deck, but even then you'd be far better off going for something like Florges EX or Mega Gardevoir EX. Sorry. There's a Dunsparce that's got Call for Family that gets 1 Pokemon and has a retreat cost. And that really is about, as much as I need to say for that. It's far from good, ladies and gentlemen. But new cards are, new cards. I like to take you through everything, but unfortunately, I think I've picked all the gems I can from those particular little mini sets. So on to the big news of the week, and that is, we knew that Expanded was staying as black and white on. I told you that last week. We knew that Standard was going to be X and Y on, or if you want to be a pedant, Kalos starter set on. However, one thing which is quite interesting is that Houston Regionals have been announced as being expanded, and not just in Top Cut. They are going to be expanded for the whole tournament. Now, I was predicting, and you can look it up on Facebook and stuff, these predictions did happen. Essentially, I was saying, look, we've seen quotes from people who know more than we do. And we've seen that Pokemon trialed Expanded last year. And we've seen that they've kept it this year. They've got to be planning something. Now, as we stand at the moment, and it is just at the moment, but as it stands at the moment, Houston Regionals is going to be expanded. And that's all we've heard. I would not be surprised if all regionals were expanded. Now, there's basically 3 options here. Pokemon dictates that some are expanded and some are standard. That makes absolutely no sense. Because how does Pokemon decide which are expanded and which are standard? And also, they've never done anything like that before. Option number 2, the tournament organisers get a choice. Like League Challenges have been this year, and I believe are going to carry on next year, the tournament organiser has a choice to run their League Challenges as either standard or expanded format. When was the last time you went to an expanded format League Challenge? And I sincerely believe Pokemon are trying to push expanded. They're keeping it, they trialled it. I don't see the point of trialling it last year and then keeping it if they're just going to... Because last year we saw it as Top Cut on a few regionals and basically no League Challenges, and that's my point. No League Challenges, or at least very, very few, ended up being expanded. So, I don't believe Pokemon is going to give the TOs a choice of whether to do their regionals as standard or expanded, because I don't think anyone's going to choose expanded. Because if you look at the reaction the players have been given on Facebook recently, since this news came out a few days ago, people are not excited about expanded. I am, but most people are not excited about expanded. So that leaves option number 3, and if I had to give a tentative guess, this is a guess I would give, although I have no reason for believing this other than what I'm outlining to you right now. There's no point giving the TOs a choice. I don't think they're going to do some expanded, some regular, because that doesn't really make a huge amount of sense given that they've never done it before, and how do they choose without annoying the player base, arbitrarily annoying the player base. And given that we know Houston Regionals is expanded, I think there is a very strong argument to be made for believing that we are going to have all regionals in expanded format. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where everything gets incredibly juicy. Because last year, and we went through this on the podcast, when we had regionals that went expanded for Top Cut, the vast majority of people, and I ran the numbers so that I could prove this to you, the vast majority of people basically kept the deck the same. And indeed, the vast majority of people who made it from top 32 into top 8 when they changed their decks. You change after day 1 going into top 32, so you would have to use your new expanded deck to get into top 32, or from top 32 into top 8. And this means that there's going to be a very interesting dynamic in terms of actually people using expanded. Not just actually, oh, I need to make a few changes to my deck, put a few dark patches in a dark deck and put some some prism energy as well as rainbow and aromatist decks. We're talking full-on expanded decks. Not only that, but it used to be you would only have to deal with expanded decks once you'd got to the top 32. And that means that, shall we say, the less competitive and sometimes more inventive players playing their weirder decks, you would never end up coming across those people, at least in expanded, but now you will, and that is going to create a very, very interesting dynamic. I, for one, cannot wait until Houston Regionals and maybe the other regionals, I'm guessing yes, but is far from confirmed at this point, just to see what actually wins. Now, what we're not going to be doing today is going through in great detail everything about expanded. And there's 2 reasons for that. When we get to the rotation, like when we see it's XY on, it's nice and easy. What's good now? What decks are we losing? What cards are we losing? And what decks might then become good? With expanded, there's a whole new kettle of fish. We've got current decks, old decks, and then we've got completely and utterly brand new decks. But I'm going to give you 3 examples of the kind of thing we might see in expanded. I mean, obviously, you've got things like Verbank Laser that are going to be coming back. Things like Level Ball, although we were going to have Level Ball coming back anyway. Things like Tropical Beach are coming back. But actually, Broken Vine Space is the card I'm most interested in, and this is what was weird about expanded. It opened up combos that maybe even the card creators didn't see, because, you know, when they make Shaman, they look at the format and they go, oh, and they can guess what's going to happen. Now, there are times like Lissandra's Trump card where they clearly underestimate the impact, but generally we know what's going to happen. And we often see cards being released and going, that would have been broken if, and then thinking, well, yeah, that's probably why they didn't release it until this one rotated out. But with expanded, we really do see unintended consequences. So let's go in a kind of 3-tiered system. Let's start off with Roserade from Dragons Exalted. We'll start nice and simple. Now, remember that Broken Vine Space is the new stadium which is coming out in Ancient Origins, which allows grass Pokemon to evolve the turn you put them down. And something which must be pointed out at this stage, it is the card that is evolving that we look at, not the card into which it is evolving. So, for instance, Pineco into Forretress is absolutely fine because Pineco is a grass Pokemon. So Roserade from Dragons Exalted has the ability Le Parfum. When you evolve this Pokemon from your hand, when you play this Pokemon from your hand, to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may search for any card and put it into your hand. I can see that as a 1 or a 2 of in any grass deck. Because all you need to do in Expanded, all you need to do is just play a 1-1 or a 2-2 line of that, and then you can basically search for any card you like. It is, quite frankly, a nice little consistency boost, especially with losing cards like Computer Search, although given that we're going to have Shaman, Unknown, and all the trainer draw we've got at the moment, one might reasonably argue, do we need any more consistency? Taking it up a step, we have got Excelgor. And he is from Dark Explorers, so another one that rotated out last year. And for a double colourless energy, he's got the attack, deck and cover. 50 damage, the defending Pokemon is now paralysed and poisoned, and you shuffle Shelmet, Excelgor and the double colourless, plus whatever cards may be attached to him, tools etc., back into your deck. Fair enough. And we saw this played with Vileplume from Undaunted back in the day. And that was the Vileplume which blocked trainers for both parties. But that Vileplume is getting an almost, at least in any way that counts, exact reprint in Ancient Origins, in that there is a Vileplume with an ability which blocks trainers. So we've still got the Vileplume, and we've still got the Excelgor, but now we also have Broken Vine Space, which means you are, and it's going to take a lot of cards to do, but it's doable, with your Shaymins, with your Roserades, with your Trainer Draw, although I don't know how much Trainer Draw you'd want to play, because it would all be useless when you got it out. It is possible to go Oddish, Gloom, Vileplume, Shelmet, Excelgor, double colourless energy, and you can have your opponent paralysed, poisoned, and trainer locked on the first turn, or the second turn, because if you went first you wouldn't be able to do that, but on your first turn of the game. And if you didn't play back when this was a thing, it's worse than you realise, because if you're paralysed, you basically need to get out of it using trainer cards or abilities. Well, you got no trainer cards, so it's just abilities that can get you out. And don't get me wrong, you can use stuff like Virizion in Expanded, and you can use stuff like Keldeo, as people did back then, but it's still going to be mighty, mighty awkward. And that brings me to the absolute silliest combo that people have, and this is only the one we found out at the moment, but it's it's really quite it's really quite a good one. The most potentially broken combo we found in Expanded. And by the way, as we go through, my usual rule on this podcast will apply. I am generally going to be talking about standard format unless I specifically talk about Expanded. But now that we are going to be having standard and Expanded, well, at least it looks like we're going to, have a lot more of them, essentially, I'm just going to be covering more on the podcast. So don't worry, I am going to go through everything you need to know, like I've been doing for the past 3 years. Now, when people said about Shiftry, my mind immediately went to the Flashfire Shiftry. Discard a grass energy, draw 3 cards, and then 20 damage times a number of bench Pokemon for a grass and a double colourless. And that's yours and your opponent's. Now, when you get a Skyfield in play, and yes, I know you can't use Broken Vine Space and Skyfield on the same turn, but you essentially use Broken Vine Field to get everything, Broken Vine Space to get everything out on turn 1, and then turn 2 you're hitting for potentially 160 with Shiftry. Problem with that, and I looked at that and I went, oh, hang on a second, 2 energy attachments, it ain't all that in a bag of potato chips. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is not the Shiftry we're thinking about. The Shiftry we're thinking about is the Shiftry from Next Destinies, which will be legal in Expanded. Before Broken Vine Space, this was a card, and I was doing the podcast back when this came out, and everybody basically looked at it and went, kind of useful, but no one's ever going to play it, and nobody did. Now, it's got the ability Giant Fan. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may flip a coin. If heads, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, your opponent shuffles that Pokemon and all cards attached to it into his or her deck. And now we've got Broken Vine Space. Now, this Shiftry is a dark Pokemon, but as long as we've got a Grass Nuzleaf, and we do, in Expanded, we got plenty of Grass Nuzleafs. As long as we've got a Grass Nuzleaf, we can go ahead and evolve that Nuzleaf into Shiftry. And that means, and you can use this isn't an attack, ladies and gentlemen, this is an ability. I say plenty of Grass Nuzleafs, I'm lying to you, ladies and gentlemen, we've got one from Flashfire, but we only need one, so it's fine. You can use this on turn 1 because it's an ability. It is not an attack. And it doesn't get turned off by Silent Lab because it's a stage 2. Although it will still be turned off by Wobbuffet or Garbodor. So if you go first, you might want to try volleying into a Garbodor with a tool attached quite soon. And I'm hoping by now you've figured out what I'm saying, but essentially what you do is this. You search for Broken Vine Space, and then you try and evolve 4 Seedots into 4 Nuzleafs into 4 Shiftries on turn 1. And that means that your opponent has to shuffle in, assuming you can hit heads, they have to shuffle in 4 Pokemon into their deck. And of course, if they shuffle all their Pokemon into their deck, they lose. Now, the format in Expanded is ripe for this deck. Let's see the things that you've got to help you. You've got all the trainer draw, your acrobike, your bicycle, your roller skates, etc. Then you've got your Pokemon draw, your unknowns, your shamans, and heck, you can even use Roserade here, although I don't think you would. I think space would be a bit of an issue there. Although, from the people I've seen who have been kind of testing this over the last couple of days, the most commonly reported problem is, essentially, I go off like a maniac if I can find Broken Vine Space. If I can't, then I fail. And that does make perfect sense. So, if you can get this stuff out, and there's an awful lot of draw, then you just start evolving them up, and every time you evolve, you get to, essentially, flip a coin. If heads, get rid of one of your opponent's Pokemon. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that Super Scoop Up is going to be legal in Expanded. And if you've got Broken Vine Space out, which hopefully you will, when you Super Scoop Up, you can then just go Seedot, Nuzleaf, Shiftry, and then flip again. You've got Scoop Up Cyclone. So that is potentially 5 extra opportunities. Now, prizes are going to be an issue, of course. You won't have taken any prizes. So let's assume, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing is prize, and that is obviously a big assumption. That means that you've got your 4 Shiftries, your 4 Super Scoop Ups, and you've got your Scoop Up Cyclone. That alone gives you 9 potential opportunities to flip a coin and get rid of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, the absolute most they're going to start with is 6 basics. And we all know, ladies and gentlemen, that the chances are they are probably not going to be starting with 6 basics. They are probably going to be starting with 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 on a good day. And that means that it's going to be perfectly within the realms of possibility for people to make this deck go off and win. And the worst thing about this deck is going to be, you can sit down opposite your opponent and they can have a turn which might take 10-15 minutes, and then they win. And all you've done is sit down and watch your opponent play for a couple of minutes. And that's your game. Now, we're playing best of 3, so you're then going to have a chance where you can go first and blah, blah, blah. But even then, it's going to be a fight to get down as many Pokemon as you want. And here's the real kicker with this deck. It doesn't matter how good your setup is. It's all to do with how many heads your opponent can hit. Because you can get 6 Pokemon set up beautifully on turn 1, but if your opponent sets up and hits 6 heads, you've lost. Regardless of how good your setup is. It almost turns a Pokemon trading card game into a one-player game. Your opponent essentially sets you a, here's how many Pokemon I've got on the field, and you try and get rid of them. Now, if it's all sounding a bit like a doomsday scenario, what I should mention is, don't worry too much, because first of all, they're going to have a really good deck list, and then they're going to have to hit heads. If they don't pull off this crazy combo in the first couple of turns, you're going to lose. This deck will play no energy. This deck will not be trying to attack. It will just be trying to rid you of Pokemon. That's all it's aiming to do. It's all it's trying to do. But there are going to be games where you lose straight away without drawing a card. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to suck. How do you get around this deck then? Let's assume that your opponent goes off. How do you get around it? Well, first of all, Latios could be hilarious for this deck. Because they're going to be using Unknown, which is donkable with Latios. And they're going to be using Seedot, which is donkable with Latios. And to be fair, they are going to be using... now, the Seedots that we've got that we're going to have in Expanded. There's one from Next Destinies with 40 HP and one from Flashfire with 50 HP. So, one of them, assuming people playing a 50 HP one, you only need a muscle band to actually take it down. So, it means that you're going to be able to take that down quite simply. And even Unknown's got 60 HP, so you stick a muscle band and Latios for 1 psychic energy is going to be killing it. So there's one way to kill it. The other way, of course, Wobbuffet. If your opponent never attacks and doesn't play anything to get rid of energy, Wobbuffet wins the game. Because they cannot shuffle Wobbuffet in. Now, of course, if Wobbuffet's not active, then your opponent, if you've got Wobbuffet active and something on the bench, then your opponent can Lysandra up the thing on the bench. Wobbuffet then goes to the bench, and then they can try and get rid of Wobbuffet using the ability. But the deck lists that I've seen are playing only Az or Sycamore. AZ, because you can then get the Shiftry back into your hand, so you can then obviously just lay the free cards down again and try the flip again. Or Sycamore just to try and burn through your deck to try and draw into what you need. It is ludicrous. You play this with Super Scoop Ups, and you play it with your Scoop Up Cyclone, and it is potentially a ridiculous and incredibly annoying and unfair deck. But let's not get over the top here. It's completely wiped out by Wobbuffet because its only win condition is this ability. Wobbuffet stops the ability, they cannot win the game. Because most of these aren't going to be playing energy, and they're not going to be playing Lysandra to get your bench Pokemon into the active to get rid of Wobbuffet's ability. Although you should still try not to bench anything else if you are the player who's got the Wobbuffet active. Latios, if you go first, is going to decimate this deck. But then again, even if you start Latios, if they hit enough heads on the next turn, you're still going to lose, unfortunately. So there is plenty of downsides to this deck. It's got to draw well. It's weak to Latios. It loses entirely to Wobbuffet, etc. Heck, even Garbodor. Because the lists I've seen haven't been playing Startling Megaphone. So they lose to Garbodor. Okay, so maybe they play one Lysandra for Wobbuffet and they play one Megaphone for Garbodor. Well, okay, brilliant. Now they're less consistent and they're less likely to go off like a rocket. Now, when this Wailord deck came out and got all popular, I went straight onto YouTube and I made a video about Wailord, and it went down very, very well. People seem to like it. I haven't done that this time, purely because I've just started doing these videos about the rotation. If you really, really want a video about this deck, do let me know. I might see if I've got time. But between the rotation videos, the other stuff in my life that isn't Pokemon related, and my Wossy Plays videos, I'm not sure I'm going to have time to do so. And I don't really want to stop my rotation videos to do a video which is already a day or two out of date, to be honest. People have been talking about this for a couple of days. I like to get on it as quick as I can. Speaking of Wossy Plays, go check it out, guys. It won't take you very long at all. Go on to YouTube, search Wossy Plays, or just go on to youtube.com/PTCGRadio. It's the top featured channel. A lot of people listening to this podcast don't check out Wossy Plays at the moment. It's just like this, but video games. It's me finding out way too much information and sharing it with you lovely people so you don't have to. I have a sneaking suspicion. If you try it, you might just like it. So, that's the new rotation news, and that's the new Shiftry deck. I am going to be getting all kinds of into the rotation over the next couple of days, and what I'm going to do probably every week for the next few weeks, I'm going to come to you with more expanded news. Essentially, hey, here's a new deck somebody mentioned to me. I'm going to go around, I'm going to poll all of my friends for what they think is going to be big in expanded. And although as we run up to Worlds, I'm going to have to obviously focus on this year's Worlds format, I think we've talked about Standard next year quite a bit. We're going to leave that for a little bit, although obviously anything relevant that comes up we'll be talking about. But we're really going to start honing in on Expanded in a way that we never needed to last year, because as I said, it was only used in the top cuts of regionals and the very, very rare league challenges. Nobody really played it like that. Like I say, people just changed a few cards. As it becomes bigger and more relevant, I'm going to be delving into it on this podcast, bringing you all the decks and cards and tricks and techs and strategies you could possibly need to know. But we're going to finish off today having a a nice chat about this. I'm still calling it Broken Vine Space, I'm going to be honest with you. And we're going to be talking all about the cards that are relevant in terms of cards that might be able to take advantage of it. Now, I have gone through and I've got my list, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not in Expanded yet, because I haven't had a chance to look through Expanded properly. I've given you examples like Roserade and Shiftry, etc., but I haven't really gotten any further than that. What I'm going to be looking at is the standard format, although all of these will also be legal in Expanded. And I am going to be looking at all the cards, it won't take long, they're all terrible, that can use Broken Vine Space in the standard format, and which ones you need to look at. And I'm going to be quite quick, because like I say, before Ancient Origins, they ain't much good. So we're going to go through these as quickly as we hopefully can. And I've split them into categories. And the categories are meh, which means I don't like it. Much space, which means it's potentially useful and relevant, but in all honesty, it takes up too much space to actually work properly. And these are basically the stage 2s with interesting abilities that we're just not going to want to dedicate the space to. And then what's the other one we've got? Is okay, that could be useful. And no is it's terrible. So no, meh, and along with much space. So, starting off then with the first set which we are losing, and the first set we're losing is going to be, the first one we are keeping is going to be the X and Y set. Now, in X and Y, we have a Beedrill. And I want Beedrill to be good. There are 2 Beedrills, actually, we're going to be mentioning. And both these Beedrills, I want so much to be good. But the fact of the matter is, they're just not very good. Now, the Beedrill from X and Y has an interesting attack. It's not amazing. It's interesting. It's got an attack for 1 grass energy that does 20 damage and poison. That's not the interesting attack. Or for 2 grass energies, it does 40 damage times the number of heads you can flip on 3 coins. If all 3 are heads, prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to Beedrill during your opponent's next turn. If you can hit 3 heads, and that gives a roughly 1 in 8 chance, that's 12.5%, you're going to be hitting 3 heads. And you do 120 damage, and you're immune the following turn. But it takes 2 grass energy, you'll never actually get it running, and unfortunately, I want it to be good. I really want it to be good. But the reality is, it's just not. Also in the meh category, we have Ledian, which, it does tackle for 30 damage for 1 energy, but it's really not that great. Stick a Muscle Band, 50 for 1 energy on turn 1 is okay, which is why Ledian even warrants a mention. But it's not great. And the one thing I want you to remember about all of these Pokemon is thanks to Broken Vine Space, you can have them all on turn 1. So I'm thinking, if I get this Pokemon going on turn 1, is it going to make me happy? In the category, we have Simisage. And he goes into because I can see me using this attack. It's a stage 1, for 1 colourless energy, 20 damage, but you get to choose an attack that your opponent's active Pokemon cannot use next turn. So, Seismitoad's Quaking Punch, for instance, cannot be used on the next turn. And most Pokemon are played for 1 attack. Landorus's Hammerhead in Expanded, for instance. All of a sudden, they don't get to use it. Chestnut is just terrible. I'm not even going to tell you what Chestnut does. It's just terrible. Now, there's a beautiful Pavilion card, which was actually released in a couple different colours. And for 1 grass energy, you can choose a sleep or poisoned and give them that. Or for 3 colourless energy, it does 30 damage plus 30 more for each type of basic energy. And kind of like the Arceus I talked about from that legendary collection, if you go and pile a whole bunch of, different basic energies onto it, that's fine, but I just don't think you're going to. So Pavilion unfortunately goes into meh. And finishing off in X and Y with we have Gogoat. And he's a weird kind of consistency Pokemon. For one, he's a stage 1. For 1 colourless energy, you get to search for 2 supporter cards and then put them into your hand. Now, if your opponent makes you shuffle your hand into your deck with N or something similar, then, okay, it's not actually going to do anything. But it's nice because, you can get a Lysandra and a Sycamore, for instance. Lysandra for the next turn, Sycamore for the turn after. I quite like it. So, I don't know if it's going to see any use, but it's interesting. Going into Flashfire, we have Butterfree. Now, Butterfree's a weird one, because he doesn't need Broken Vine Space. Because Caterpie and Metapod have both got the abilities that allow you to evolve straight up. What I'm going to say is, Butterfree's been able to evolve straight away since he came out. And he was only used in Miltank decks, Miltank doing 80 damage for 1 energy if you got a stage 2 on the bench, because it was the easiest way to get out of stage 2. Yeah, that's about as much as I can say about that, to be honest. Shiftry, I mentioned a minute ago. I love him for consistency, but he's a stage 2, and if you're playing a grass deck, I like that you can discard a grass energy and draw 3 cards, but finding all 3 parts for stage 2, unless you're playing a really fast deck, is going to be difficult. I think needing a grass and a double colours to attack is a bit too much. We've also got Roserade. Flip a coin until you get tails for 1 grass energy. For each heads, discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Remember, we've got the item, the tool Trick Coin, which means you can reflip. Again, I don't think it's great, but I think it's kind of interesting. And finally, Fortress, which evolves from Pineco, so even though he's a metal Pokemon, he can evolve on turn 1. And now the attack is useful, potentially. 20 damage for a double colourless, plus 20 for each colourless in your opponent's retreat cost. They've got a retreat cost of 3, you do 80 damage. Could be useful very occasionally. But I'm more into the ability here. When you evolve, put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So, for instance, if you're playing a Tyranitar deck, where he does loads more damage depending on how many damage counters are on your opponent's Pokemon, maybe Fortress comes up and does a whole bunch of damage, and then, or 1 or 2 to everybody, depending on how many you can evolve up, and then Tyranitar comes and starts wrecking face. Again, far from amazing, but interesting nonetheless. Now, going into Furious Fists, and this one's going to be quick, because by my count, unless I've got something wrong, and I'm looking at the set list here, and I'm fairly sure I don't, we only have 2 possible evolutions from Furious Fists. We've got Victory Bell, who is one of those Pokemon who falls into the much space category. He's quite interesting, but are you really going to want to be putting a minimum 1/1/1 line just to use the ability? Stage 2s take up a lot of space in your deck. Now, what he does, he's got an ability, don't worry about the attack. The ability allows you to discard a grass energy attached to Victory Bell, and then your opponent's active Pokemon is confused and poisoned. Now, automatic confusion and paralysis is very interesting, but the reality is, not only do you have to get the stage 2 out and take up all the space in your deck, but you've also got to attach a grass energy to Victory Bell, and you're probably going to want it somewhere else. So I just don't buy him. Now, Excelgor fits into, because he has got a little bit to him. It's a stage 1, and he can attack for 1 colourless energy. So far, so good. 20 damage, but the turn you evolve him, he does 60 damage. Now, you stick a muscle band on, that's 80 damage, turn 1 for 1 energy. Or in Expanded, you can use a Silver Bangle to do 90 on turn 1. And against something like a Seismitoad, that can be a KO because of weakness. So Excelgor is interesting, but then next turn, you're only doing 20 damage. However, if you put a second energy on Excelgor for the next turn, you do 40 damage, And if he would be damaged next turn, you flip a coin if heads prevent that damage. So if you're really lucky, you can be doing 60 or 80 or maybe even expanded 90 damage on turn 1. And then every other turn you do 40 damage with a 50-50 chance of being immune to damage the following turn. Interesting, if not quite amazing. Certainly I would say one of the stronger cards in terms of, cards that we might want to be using before Ancient Origins. Moving into Phantom Forces, we have 3 possibilities here. We have Venomoth, who fits into the category. Because he's a stage 1, he attacks for 1 grass energy, and it doesn't do any damage, but it reads, whenever your opponent plays a trainer card from his or her hand during his or her next turn, your opponent flips a coin. If tails that card has no effect, your opponent still discards that card. And if you're playing a deck, something like Groudon, for instance, where for the first few turns, you don't need to do anything other than attach energy, I quite like Venomoth. Now remember, Trainer includes Supporter, and Stadium, and Tool, and Item. Every time your opponent goes to play any of them, they have to flip a coin, and if it's tails, they discard it and it does nothing. I think there is potential with Venomoth to just troll your opponent hilariously. The problem is, of course, you're not doing any damage, so all you'd really be doing is stalling for time. In Expanded, you could use something like Hypnotoxic Laser, or you could even, for instance, play a Venomoth Victory Bell deck to stop your opponent playing trainers, hopefully, while leaving them confused and poisoned. Although there are so many holes in that deck, I don't even know where to start. There is a Yanmega that for a single grass energy allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 6 cards, as if you were end to 6. And that is it's a stage 1. It really is just a nice, like we talked about with Gagoat, it's a bit of a consistency boost. I've got nothing, let's give myself a new hand and see where we can go with this. Now, the second attack is interesting, but it takes 3 energy, so yeah, it does 100 if you bring it active that turn. But 3 energy is just a little bit too much. And finally, Levani, it's just terrible. I think you can search for Pokemon tools and attach them as your attack. If you are using Levani to attack, it doesn't matter what it does, because you've lost that game. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but that particular Levani is bad. Now, if Levani, and I'm probably pronouncing it in a way you don't like, I apologise for that. I also apologise if Levani is one of your favourite Pokemon. If it's a Pokemon you're very keen on, because, honestly, that is a terrible, terrible card. Now, moving into Primal Clash, we have another Beedrill, which I really want to be good, that I think I'm hoping too much. Now, it's got one extremely interesting attack. For 1 grass energy, and it is a stage 2, remember. During your next turn, if the defending Pokemon is damaged by an attack, it is knocked out. So you do Allergic Shock, and then next turn, you do any damage you like, your opponent is knocked out. So you can do these fun little attacks where it does, very little damage, but has a fun little effect. Think like Quaking Punch. Although hopefully not Quaking Punch. But again, it's, all your opponent needs to do is switch their active Pokemon, and all of a sudden it does nothing. There is a Tangrowth, which at the absolute best, for a double colourless and a grass, 50 damage, healing 20. It's bad. Now, there are 2 Sceptiles in Primal Clash. One just takes too much space. But I like this. Now again, it's just like all the other, and you'll see there is a little bit of a theme here. Really interesting stage 2 grass Pokemon that take a whole lot of space. Sceptile, this is the non-ancient trait we're talking about. Once during your turn, you may attach a grass energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. If you do, heal 30 damage. And I've checked with some judges, and apparently, and it's in the compendium as well, that is an extra energy attachment. And it heals at the same time. So you can actually get a second energy attachment with Sceptile. That's pretty good. The ancient trait one's got a Mega Barrier like Groudon, like Primal Groudon, which means it cannot be hurt buy anything like trainer cards other than tools or stadiums, so no Lysandre, no Crushing Hammer, etc. I don't really like the second attack, but the first attack does 30 damage for 1 grass, 60 if you flip a heads. It's not great. Speaking of Stage 2 grass Pokemon with really interesting abilities if you're willing to dedicate that much space to them, Ludicolo. Its ability is Pokemon Catcher. Flip a coin, if heads, switch their bench with their active. That's pretty cool. Again, you've got to dedicate a bit of space in your deck to doing this, but I would say it's pretty much worth it. Now, there's a Masquerain, which has got 2 interesting attacks. It's a Stage 1. For a grass energy, you confuse the opponent's active Pokemon, and then you switch back to the bench. Kind of like Donphan's hit and run attack, spinning turn, but instead of 40 damage, you do confusion. And Air Slash does 50 damage for a double colourless energy. Both vaguely interesting, but I think there are better attacking options. And finishing off with Primal Clash, we have a Breloom, which is just plain terrible. Firstly, it uses fighting energy. Secondly, for a fighting and a colourless, i.e. 2 attachments, you get to do 40 damage, or if you can flip it heads, 60 damage plus confusion. It's underpowered. It's terrible. Let's not talk any more about it. So the final pre-Ancient Origin set is Roaring Skies. And there are a few here, and we're starting in this set to look quite good. So let's start off then with Executor. 20 damage times the number of colourless Pokemon your opponent has in play for a grass energy. This I like. Against, your Rayquaza decks, they're likely to have 5 or 6 colourless Pokemon down. That's 100, 120 damage for 1 grass energy. Of course, it's entirely reliant on what your opponent's got on their side of the field, and it means your opponent can just control what's on their side of the field and limit what you're doing. Yeah. Now there's a Beautifly, which very much goes into the category. I know I haven't been sticking with the categories as well as I could have, but I'm back to it. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. Now, the attack takes a grass and a double colourless, and it does 80, and you can make your opponent switch their active. It's not amazing. It's also not as good as a Safeguard from Suicune or Sigilyph, because it only prevents damage, not all effects. So if your opponent can paralyze or poison or confuse you, whereas, if they're an EX, whereas that couldn't happen to Suicune or Sigilyph. However, Suicune and Sigilyph are both gone, so in standard format, this is the best Safeguarder we've got. Now there's a Dustox, which I almost don't want to mention. There's 2, because Executor and Beautifly are kind of interesting, as are the next 2 I'm going to talk about. The Dustoxes are really letting Roaring Skies down. They're Stage 2s. One does 30 and confusion for a double colourless energy. The other one does 20 damage for a grass, which is not good on a Stage 2, but it's got Delta Plus, which means if you take a KO, you get to take an extra prize. And this could, in a really, really, almost certainly very, very hard to get going, inconsistent deck, you could use this with Beedrill. Beedrill uses his attack, and then Dustox finishes it off and takes an extra prize. I don't think it's going to be good. And that leads us to probably the 2 most interesting pre-Ancient Origins grass Pokemon that could use Broken Vine Space. We've all known, hopefully for a while now, that Nincada can evolve into one of 2 Pokemon, and they were both printed in Roaring Skies, and they were both kind of interesting. Ninjask allows you to discard a card from your hand, and then your opponent discards a top card of your opponent's deck. And that's kind of fun now that Lysandra's trump card has been banned. You use Ninjask to discard a whole bunch of cards from your hand, and then use Trick Shovel and discard a whole bunch of cards, and your opponent is immediately on the back foot. And he's got free retreat, so you can easily do this twice per turn without a switch. Put Ninjask active, discard a card to discard 1 card from their deck, retreat into a second Ninjask, and off we go again. He's a Stage 1, remember. And the last one is Shedinja. Now, he's got Hopeless Scream. Now, actually, he's got two interesting attacks. Now, he is a 30 HP stage 1, which has got to be pointed out. In Expanded, Verbank Laser is going to kill him. But for a Grass Energy, you can put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon, and then switch Shedinja to the bench. Could even be used in a Tyranitar or Mega Tyranitar deck, where, like I said previously, you want to have damage on them. Hopeless Scream does 50 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. He's only got 30 HP. Now, I don't think that's going to be a particularly big issue in Standard. I don't think he's going to have enough HP. Even with that item card, the tool, the Boots thing, which will raise his HP to a whopping 50, because we haven't got cards like Frozen City, which are going to make it so easy to get damage on him. But as we move into the Expanded format, then that combo I've mentioned on the podcast a few times is well up for grabs. You've got Mew EX, who can copy the attack of Shedinja, and as long as you put a Rainbow Energy onto Mew EX while Frozen City is down, you take 1 damage counter from attaching the Rainbow Energy, 2 damage counters for attaching an energy to a non-plasma Pokemon, and now Mew is hitting for 150 damage. Now, this combo was doable previously, and still is in the Worlds format, the format we're still in at the moment, by virtue of the fact that you can Wally into Shedinja on turn 1. But it's going to be... Although, having said that, you've basically got a choice. Because if you play the Broken Vine Space in order to evolve turn 1 into Shedinja, you cannot also play the Frozen City. So, maybe it's not quite as good, but I still think it's a viable deck in Expanded. I think it's one that people are going to have a bit of fun with, going to have a little bit of a play with. You could even play Ninjask and Shedinja in the same deck, so be, half decking them out, half hitting for ridiculous damage with Mew. I will let you lovely people work that one out for yourselves. So, there are all the cards we currently have, but of course, by the time Broken Vine Space is actually released, we're going to have a whole bunch of new grass Pokemon in Ancient Origins, and they are better than the ones we've seen so far. And I'm not entirely convinced that this is a coincidence, because, if you look back at the grass Pokemon, and we've just looked at all of them, we are going to have to wrap this up in a minute, we're over an hour today. This is a long one. It's only really Roaring Skies that we start to get these really interesting Pokemon, although I still think that, it's ripe for using something like Ludicolo in a deck. But we have got some very, very interesting grass Pokemon coming in Ancient Origins, all of which we've spoken about in the very recent past, so we're not going to go into huge amounts of detail. But we've got Vileplume. It's a stage 2, but it blocks trainers. For you and your opponent, you can go first and get Vileplume out and lock your opponent out of trainers the entire game. That is pretty bad. There's also a Blossom, but let's just make it nice and clear. It's nowhere near as good as the Vileplume. It does have a hit and run attack that does 20 damage for 1 grass energy. We have Ariados with its ability Poison Nest. Once during your turn you may use this ability, both active Pokemon are now poisoned, excluding grass Pokemon. You play a grass deck, it's a stage 1, you get it going in 1 turn, you poison your opponent. And then of course we've got both the Vespiquens. Now the one with the ancient trait has got Fated Double, it can have 2 Pokemon tools attached to it, and I did get I got a lovely little message or a tweet or an email of somebody recently basically saying, you keep talking about Fated Double and the Pokemon that have it, how about some information about the tools we should use? I think that's a wonderful idea. That's something we'll be doing in the next few weeks as we get closer to Ancient Origins dropping. Now, there are 2 attacks on this Vespiquen. Both can be done for 1 energy. For a grass energy, you do 20 damage and heal the damage done. So, for instance, if you do 20 damage, you heal 20. You put 2 muscle bands on Vespiquen, you do 60, heal 60. But you've only got 90 HP, so you're going to be 1-hit KO'd a lot. The more interesting attack is Fury Swipes for a double colourless energy. Flip 3 coins, 30 times the number of heads. You flip 3 heads, and again that's a 1 in 8 or a 12.5% chance, and you're doing 90 damage, which will KO something like a Groudon, a Kyogre, a Seismitoad that's weak to grass. But by far, and I've saved the best till last, I've done it deliberately, the non-ancient trait Vespiquen. Be Revenge. 20 damage plus 10 more for each Pokemon in your discard pile. It's Flareon. get a whole bunch of Pokemon in the discard pile, get Vespiquen going turn 1, and you could in theory hit for 200 damage on the first turn of the game. There's even cards like Unknown in Ancient Origins, not a grass Pokemon, but you discard it as long as it's on your bench and draw a card. You get a card and you get a Pokemon in your discard pile. Quite frankly, that sounds like fun to me. So really it's Roaring Skies where the good ones came in, but it's Ancient Origins which is really upping the ante with grass Pokemon. Over the next few weeks we will start having a look at some of the black and white Pokemon like Roserade, like Shiftry, like Excelgor, that we can use in Expanded as well as in Standard, assuming of course that we get confirmation that it is going to be used more. We're going to hold off on Expanded just a tiny bit until we get confirmation. Anyway, we are now at 1 hour and 5 minutes. It's one of the longer podcasts that we've done, so I'm not going to spend too much longer on this other than to say, firstly, thank you very much for listening. Secondly, make sure that you check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PTCGRadio. And another appeal, please, if you haven't checked out my video game channel, Wassy Plays, please do so. It won't take you long, and like I said earlier, I have a sneaking suspicion you will like it. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that will do for today. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.